I was probably very close to 9, round about 9 years old, when my father got this one. He snared it and brought it home on the horse, which I can tell you about later. It was rather strange. He built a cage, quickly built a cage with gaps between, a box to put it in. And I often think there wasn't much transport in those days, but somehow or other by 9 o'clock that night, people were coming from everywhere, so news had spread. It was distinctly they thought it was almost non-existent at that time. Do you see what I mean? It was quite exciting that one was caught.
And what did your father intend to do with it?
Well, and this is one of the funny ones, there was a professor in Hobart who was buying them and selling them at a great price. He was a professor of zoology too, I might tell you. And he was selling them to the zoos mainly in Asia and Europe, I think. Now, Jimmy Harrison, who was a merchant in Wynyard, usually dealt in everything, bought and sold, and he was offering somewhere about £16 for one then, a live one. They had been getting them, but of course that had died out. And my father found out that this professor would give £25. So he negotiated, and I think Jim Harrison did arrange the shipment, but it did go to the Sydney Zoo. My father didn't sell it for abroad. It went to the Sydney Zoo. But as I understood, it was quite a young animal. It did have a damaged paw, and by all we could find out in later years, it didn't live to old age.
Can you still see that tiger in your mind's eye, Cath?
Plainly, yes. Yes, because as children we were very excited with it. We had never seen one. And don't forget, it wasn't a tiger then. That was never heard of until about 40 years ago. Somebody coined that word. It was a hyena to us. And there was no such a word as a thylacine or a tiger. It was a hyena that everybody spoke of. They thought it was carrion, it ate carrion, but it never did. It would not eat anything that it didn't kill.
Can you remember being frightened by it as a 9-year-old?
No, not really, because I grew up with all sorts of animals. And no, I've never been afraid of anything, and I'm 86, so I couldn't have been afraid.
What's the story you have about a tiger in your kitchen?
Well, my father built this cage which fitted in the big old kitchen, our farm kitchen, and a big fire there, and everyone came. As I said, the poor animal was poked at. We tried to get it to bite, and we tried to get it to attack us, And it was there on exhibition until about 10 o'clock that night. They called it the wild dog for a while. Now, it's not much like a dog. If you saw it in among the ferns, which grew out our way, it might have looked like a dog. It was about that height, but it has a square jaw. Not fierce eyes at all. They're not fierce. They were very mild, very more like a cat's eyes when it's happy. It wasn't a wild animal. The tail was very rigid. When it turned round, it couldn't get round in the box because the rigid tail wouldn't let it go round. It could only turn its head. It wasn't a very big box. So it has this rigid tail. My father always said there was no way it could jump a log. He knew it was following him at a distance because he used to see the bushes move. Our dog, who we'd have with us, always disappeared. They were very frightened. Dogs would never go near one.
And this is around the Laponia area?
Yes, it's now Miuna, towards Priolina. And that would have been in the before occupation, it would have been a hunting ground. There's a plain runs right across from almost Sisters Hills, Rocky Cape, right across Priolina. There's a plain runs across there. Now, the Aborigines had not been in that area for 70, 80 years, so everything had grown up. But you see, the animals still stayed on the plains. The animals that the Aborigines had kept there they used to come in and get their animals and take them back to the beach. The animals had stayed there. That's why the Thylacine, and that's why the kangaroo and the cat and everything was prolific in the area, because they had grown up with the scrub, but the Aborigines had gone because our area was not settled until very late in that 20th century.
Cath, when you were describing the tiger in your kitchen, it sounds as though you felt some sympathy for it.
We did, yes. We did, and even my father tells the story when he looked at it and was ready to take it, out of the thing, and he was thinking, could he let it go? But £25 was a lot of money for us then. It was something we hadn't seen for a long time.
And
even then, he had this feeling. We had the feeling that perhaps this is the last one we'll ever see. As a child, I'm sure I dreamed about it.
Cath, do you like to think they're still out there?
No, I know they're not, because we've got none of this ground left. Every plain was the first thing that the settlers wanted. So they took every Aboriginal hunting ground because they were cleared. The first settlers looked for plains everywhere, and every plain was an Aboriginal hunting ground. The animals were there. The first thing they did was shot the animals. They blamed them for killing the sheep. It couldn't kill a sheep. It couldn't even kill a lamb. Opened the jaws back. You know how a snake opens?
Yes.
And it snapped and held and snapped and held. It didn't tear. That's why we were poking it with pieces of cloth to see how it bit. So it couldn't tear an animal. Do you see what I'm meaning?
Yes.
It wasn't something it could kill. When it got blamed for killing sheep were put in countries that was too cold for them. The sheep died. The devil, and mainly the devil and the tiger cat, would have torn the animals when they died, because they were carrion eaters. And the Thylacine, of course, got blamed for it, so they shot everyone they could see. And they would have to be in numbers, because you don't get one Thylacine breeding some more, or you don't get one here and one 100 miles away breeding.